All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. So just a few logistical things. We have coffee in the outside here. If you want some coffee? And there's some refreshments in the back. If you haven't signed in already, please sign in. Restrooms are out the doors and to the left. You can use those. I want to introduce our staff to you here. We've struggled with having lack of staff in the past year. We've had a complete turnover. And so now we're fully staffed and have a great team. I want to introduce Eli Lessman. He's in the back. He's our quality planner. Eddie Ballarone is sitting next to him. We got Ty Bell in the back. We have Irene Miranda right here. And she's another planner. And we have Kara in the corner here. So we're glad to have be fully staffed here, and we can start processing grant applications a lot quicker now. So I know that we've had some struggles in the past couple years due to the pandemic, high staff turnover. We've had delays in supply chain, tractors not available, all kinds of problems. So it's delayed our program quite a bit. So we're anxious to get back up and running and on our feet again. We have from last year's program about $1 million remaining, so we're going to keep plugging away on the 2021 ranking list and process the rest of that. So today's program is to go over our applications and how to best fill out your applications for our diesel engine and equipment replacement program. So the diesel engine and equipment replacement program uses grant funds from various programs to replace equipment and engines that are cleaner than what was required by regulation. So it's very important that that particular aspect of it is to clean up old, dirty engines, put cleaner burning engines out there. And it's cleaner than what's required by the regulation. So we can't fund the project into compliance. So if there's a compliance deadline within 3 years, the project won't be eligible. So it's very, very important that recognize that this is an incentive program to improve air quality that wouldn't otherwise be done by regulation. So they call those surplus emissions. And surplus emissions by the guidelines that we have to follow, it has to be 3 years in advance of any new regulations. That's what we look at. So the funding sources we have: Carl Moyer Memorial Grant Program. We've just applied for $1.25 million. That should be coming within the next month or two. Farmer funds, we just received an allocation of $1.3 million. We have that allocation secured, so we can start processing those grants as soon as we get a ranking spreadsheet ready to go. Community Air Protection Program funds, we use those on a case-by-case basis as needed because those funds are directed to mobile source projects. So we have a whole nother program for Community Air Protection Program funds. And so if we have some funds remaining, then we'll use the Community Air Protection Program funds. What's really important to point out here on this is that these are all programs that come from the state of California. They're passed through us. We administer the grants as they come through, and we issue or send out grant agreements for smaller grant amounts. We have to follow the guidelines that are set up by the state for each of these programs. So anything I say here today that might conflict with guidelines, we will default to the guidelines for each of the programs. So I tried to make sure we don't have any conflicts, but if it does come up, then that's what we have to default to. Karen, are people able to see me on the online?
You're on my screen.
Okay. I forgot to mention, so those people that are attending online, welcome. And if you could please put your name in the chat along with your affiliation and your email address, then we can have a tally of who's attending. Looks like we have 27 participants. Okay, moving on. The project types that we're entertaining for this program are agricultural irrigation pumps, marine vessels, and off-road equipment replacement. That means tractors and bulldozers and that sort of project. So you can see here with this is an irrigation pump. You've got the older style irrigation pump with a diesel engine, and then you got a completely clean, replaced with a completely clean electric motor. These projects rank really high because we get really substantial amount of emission reductions at a cheap rate. So these are encouraged to apply. They do take time because they're dependent on PG&E. So just something to be mindful of when planning these projects. Marine vessels, we provide funding for marine vessels, replacement of the engines, repowering of the engines in marine vessels. This particular project is the Rachel Carson. It's owned by Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. We're particularly proud of this project. Engines were rather large and they needed to be replaced. And I see them as I'm passing by here in the mornings, passing through Moss Landing in the mornings, and see the smoke pouring out of the stacks. And now when I see the Rachel Carson going out, it's pretty clean. So it's very rewarding. This was an important project, so it was good to have that. This is another project that had substantial emission reductions. This is the Marina Landfills trash compactor. It's a compactor, right?
It's a
dozer compactor. Yeah, so see the old one is just it's pretty similar to the new model, but it's much cleaner engine. And then we have our bread and butter, which is tractors, agricultural tractors. So I'm going to go over eligibility next for all the projects. So all the projects have these particular requirements for them. As we discussed earlier, project has to have surplus emissions, at least 3 years of surplus emissions. We'll need to have 2 years of documented usage for the of the equipment. So anytime you take do an oil change, replace a belt, if you have the hour meter reading on that record, that's what we're looking for. The equipment has to be based in the district. 75% of it has to be used in California. We need to be able to determine the identity of the equipment. So we need legible serial numbers and engine plates. And it's really important that it's in compliance with any regulations. So if it's out of compliance, we can't fund it. This year, we're tightening up on our requirements based on the guidelines for each of the programs. We're going to need documentation establishing ownership of the baseline equipment. So bill of sale, maintenance and service and fuel records can be used for that as long as we see the owner on those records. We'll need evidence of operational condition of the baseline equipment. So this has become a particular problem, especially during the pandemic, because we did not do a program like this last year in 2022. We used the list that we had. Our funding got delayed last year as well. And so we just kept working off that existing list. And what we found is that some of the projects were no longer eligible because it had been more than a year that they'd operated. So the application would say so many hours. We go out there and do our pre-inspection, and it'd be the same hours on the hour meter a year and a half later. And so we can't fund that because it hasn't operated in the last year. This program is all about the equipment operating. Equipment has to be operated and it has to be in operational use. It can't be the tractor that's sitting in the boneyard It can't be the tractor that's used for parts. It has to be a tractor or a piece of equipment that's in use continuously. Because what happens is that we base the grant amount on the hours, the operating hours. If let's say you received a grant agreement, we're going to have the number of hours that we expect that equipment to operate, and the equipment has to operate at least that amount of hours during the life of the project. So we'll check those hours. If it's not making, we might have to extend the project out longer. But if we're saying that, there's a couple of reasons. One, if you haven't been using the equipment, it's not going to rank very well, for one thing. And the other is that it has to be operational. So keep that in mind. We've had some of the applicants have told us this past year that their sales representatives have told them not to operate it once they put the application in, because they don't want the equipment to break down and therefore be ineligible. So that's nice thinking, but it's actually doing the opposite. It's actually, if you're not using it, you become ineligible for the project. So keep that in mind. So determining operational condition, we still need maintenance and service records. So records are really important. We can't tell if we have no records for the past year, we can't really tell if it's operated or how much it's operated. And so some companies will take monthly readings of their equipment, or they'll tie their employee hours to the usage of the particular tractor. So those are types of equipment that tells us something. It gives us an idea of what's being used. So if we don't have that, then it's hard for us to tell how much it's being used. So the other important thing that we've experienced painfully this past year is that the eligibility of a piece of equipment or a project is dependent upon not taking any orders or purchasing or procuring or delivering equipment before an agreement has been executed. So we had one situation where we had a project go into an agreement. The sales rep got anxious and got pushy and delivered the tractors before we had an executed agreement. By all rights, we should have canceled that project, made it ineligible. And so we had to go back to the Air Resources Board and request a special allowance to continue with the project, because we felt that it was going to happen anyway. That is something that's really important to us. We have to stick with the requirements that are in the guidelines. If the guidelines are not followed, then we have to declare a project ineligible. So keep that in mind. You can talk to any of the planners here if you've got a question about it, or an interpretation about what we're looking for, but we do have to follow those guidelines. So in particular, some eligibility for irrigation pumps for each of the project types. For irrigation pumps, we have engine must be greater than 25 horsepower. And it must already be registered with the district. So a lot of these engines in ag fields aren't required to get permitted through our stationary source permit programs, but they are required to have registration. So if you have an irrigation pump project, make sure that it's registered with the district and in compliance. For any kind of irrigation pump electrification, we're allowing maximum of 50% funding up to $150,000. So for an irrigation pump, we'll need photographs of the existing engine, price quote for replacement equipment, and at least the most recent 2 years of usage records. For a marine vessel, we'll need an operating hour meter. To be eligible, we need an operating hour meter, greater than 25 horsepower engines, at least 2 years of documented usage. And it's very important that the project's in compliance with the Air Resources Board's commercial hovercraft regulation, which required, when it first was established, an initial report. So this might be from 10 years ago. but we do need that initial report to determine eligibility. And so, of course, the repower, if it had been repowered already, or if the repower is going to happen before a compliance deadline, it has to be at least 3 years in advance of that deadline. So we'll need, for marine vessel, we'll need photographs of the engine, hour meters, readings. We'll need the price quote for replacement engine, usage records, and a copy of the commercial hovercraft initial report. So for off-road equipment eligibility, we'll have, it has to be a greater than 25 horsepower engine. Baseline engine must be between tier 0 and tier 3. And if it's not an ag equipment, it has to be registered in DOORS, which is the off-road equipment registration, online registration system. And that has certain requirements for emission reductions for fleets. So we'll need to take a look at the fleet requirements for those particular projects. So marina, landfill, you guys have a fleet, a DOORS requirement. So you'd have to see that in your application. And it has to have an operational hour meter. Price quote for replacement equipment. So this is the checklist for applications for off-road equipment. We'll need price quote. We'll need usage records, of course, copy of the DOORS report. We'll need documentation establishing the ownership of the equipment, bill of sale or maintenance, service, fuel records that indicate the owner. And we'll have to have evidence of operational condition within the prior year. So maintenance, service, usage records, or employee timesheets, et cetera. There's several other ways of doing that. So if you have questions, contact the planning staff. So this is a snapshot of the DOORS requirements and for a particular source. So this is what we'll need for an application for off-road equipment other than agriculture. So something that helps us tremendously is if you fill out the applications thoroughly, completely. Don't use it as a placeholder. Go to the application. Don't go to the application. Put your name in. Put your company in, and then save it and submit it without any other information as a placeholder. That'll get rejected. We need to have a thorough application, as much with every field filled, and if it doesn't apply to you, put a not applicable in there. And what this does is it helps us process the applications faster. If we have to get on the phone and chase down records, chase down documents, it exponentially expands the amount of time and administrative work that we have to do that. So help us to process this better by getting us all the information that's requested in the applications. So we'll need at least 2 years of usage records. If you don't have records, start keeping records now, and you can apply in 2 years. We'll need proof of ownership. We'll need a quote for the base equipment with no add-ons. So we had one that wanted a bucket. The baseline equipment didn't have that. We can't fund it. So we can't do any add-ons. It has to be the base equipment. So we can do a maximum of 2 applications, contracts per grantee at any time. So you can apply for as many pieces of equipment you'd like, but we can only issue 2 grantees, 2 contracts per grantee. So if you already have 2 contracts, unless it's expiring within the following year, don't apply. If it's going to expire within the next 6 months to a year, feel free to apply. Then probably by the time we get to figuring out agreements, it'll be expired by then. So again, we're not accepting grantees, applications from grantees or that are not meeting contract obligations or out of compliance with district regulations or state regs. And so if you have a 2-for-1 project or and you wanted to break those out and do a 1-for-1 project, choose one or the other. Because what happens is that we end up having to repeat our or do additional evaluations of projects, which will definitely rank much lower than the 2-for-1 project. So just do the 2-for-1. We'll get to the, if one of them are ineligible, we can look at it and re-rank the project, but definitely just one or the other. So when we evaluate a project, we determine the eligibility of the project. We determine the grant amount based on cost effectiveness. So some projects are down into the early tens, like we'll get like $2,000 per ton of emission reductions. We can do a maximum of $33,000 per ton. The project, the programs don't allow us to go beyond that. So we never pay more than $33,000 for a ton of emission reductions. And so no matter how much the grant amount is, and it's a little bit confusing that we're looking at the difference between if you got a real dirty engine and you replace it with a real clean engine, you got a lot of hours on that equipment. And the piece of equipment that you're replacing it with is fairly low cost. We may be paying $3,000 or $4,000 per ton of emission reductions. The project might only be $50,000, but we're only paying a minimal amount. So to get the most from the money that we're granted, we will go with the lowest cost effectiveness, and we rank them based on that cost effectiveness to the highest. So continuing with project evaluations, we have annual use will be based on the hour meter readings. If you don't have hour meter readings, we'll use fuel receipts. So diesel fuel receipts we'll use on a case-by-case basis. They're not usually competitive. So we don't recommend it. The other part of it is that the engine that replaces like a tier 0 engine to a tier 4 engine, you have a lot lower fuel usage, and so it extends out the project life substantially. So it's best to just base it on hour meter readings. It's easier for us to process the applications. Again, I keep pounding on this one. The baseline equipment must be operational prior to execution of the grant agreement. And if it's not maintained operable, then we have to mark it as ineligible. So make sure that keep operating the equipment. So moving on to the project ranking. So top priority is disadvantaged communities. The state has refocused our attention to disadvantaged communities and low-income areas. And then low-income electrification projects within those areas. And then we apply the cost effectiveness within those areas. And so we're trying to get after that, if we hit the $33,000 mark for the cost effectiveness, then we're looking at the highest annual emission reduction. So, and of course, we're not funding more than 50% or $150,000 for the projects. So the priority areas, the red are the disadvantaged communities. The red areas are East Salinas, parts of Marina, Watsonville, Pajaro, those areas. And that's based on a number of different factors, socioeconomic, the water quality, exposure to pesticides, air quality. So there's a whole number of factors that go into determining which areas are disadvantaged. And the blue areas are low income. And so that's just looking at the income base for the population for the area. So the disadvantaged communities are prioritized and low income areas are prioritized on the next level. We don't see a whole lot of disadvantaged communities with tractors. A few here and there, but they're mostly populated areas around in cities. The low income areas, South County would have a priority So that might be where you target projects if you're in the sales world. So a little example of this from our last ranking list. You can see annual, sorry, let's see, cost effectiveness. So here we had 3 electrification projects. They went to the top, even though they're about $18,000, $19,000 per for cost effectiveness. So we pay a little higher amount for emission reductions, but there's 0 emissions from the projects. So those get highest priority within each of the disadvantaged communities or low-income areas first, and then the rest of the projects. San Felipe Farms, you can see here, is $2,300 for a ton of emissions. So that was a really good project, even though the grant amount was about $29,000. So by changing the ranking to cost effectiveness, we were able to get more projects that were smaller, and we're still getting, we're actually getting more emission reductions by doing it this way. It does take a lot more administrative effort on our part, and that's I think we get better results and we get more projects out to more of the community. So we'll be accepting applications between January 11th through March 24th. We'll be doing ranking and selection through the summer, and then we hope to sign contracts by the end of the year or through early next year. That's our goal. We've got 2.5 million to try to get through. I'll give you a little demo of our project. Let's see if I can. For a program. So you go to our webpage under grants, diesel engine and equipment replacement program. And here's our application form. And so this form it's all online. You can upload documents. It walks you through what you need to do and to apply. This helps us with storage and document management. We don't have a whole lot of paper going around. It's much easier for us if you follow this project, this application. We've got it's been successfully used in past years on this program and other programs. So what you would do is select your project type, ag pump, or marine vessel, or off-road equipment. And you have certain tabs that become available depending on the project. So it's a lot of it's self-explanatory: company name, street address, which dealership you're using, that address. There's more instructions on that. Yeah.
It's not showing up on the Zoom. You need to screen share.
It's screen shared. The screen is shared.
I was not seeing it. I don't see it.
Well, that's weird. You can't see it here?
No, it's showing the slide with the, like once you click on that.
Oh, it went to another screen.
Oh, it's sharing the wrong screen.
Okay, let's try that.
Oh, could you add Karen as a co-host?
Are you not co-host? All right. I don't know how to do that. Yeah, grab Siri. Let's see if I can do new share. Carrie, you're on there. You're a presenter.
We're trying to enable the chat, and I can't do that.
Oh, okay.
But we can wait for Siri.
Okay. Can you see that, Kara?
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
So there's somebody, Sam Pence, who has a question, but he didn't type it.
Okay.
Okay.
Kara's monitoring that, so. Great.
Working on my end.
Okay. So, Sweden.
All right, back at it. Back to this. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna step back again for those online. Okay, thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Okay. Okay, so going back to, I'm gonna step back to our webpage. If you go to the grants drop down, diesel engine and equipment replacement program. Okay, so you click on the link to the application. You select the project type. And then you fill in the required fields. It'll walk you through what you need to apply for. If it's 2-for-1 replacement, you'll get an additional engine reporting here. So click on each of these to drop, they give you drop downs to fill out engine usage. And then here's where you would choose the files to add to the project. So you can either drag and drop them, or you can choose files from your interactive window. And then go to the signature page. If you haven't, if you don't feel like you're ready to finalize it, you can save it as a draft. And what that does, you put your email in, and it'll send you a link on your email. That link will be specific to the application that you filled out. And so it'll take you right to that where you left off. And then you can finish it later. It's a sign and then submit. You hit the submit button. That's all there is to it. So if you have any questions, you can definitely call us. We'll help walk you through it, what you need to do. We receive these applications immediately. We can start processing them. So it helps substantially with our efficiency. If something's left out, the documents could be mailed to us. We can upload those. So if something's missing that's additional. But it's definitely better if you have it uploaded to the application.
I have a question about a scraper has 2 engines. Would that be considered a 2-for-1 with that?
You throw me a curveball.
So 2 engines.
Does- Wow. the scraper has two engines. One turns the wheels and the
The
other.
other one was that, so the hydraulics, the actual.
Oh, okay. They may both be eligible. We'll have to check that. That's kind of a one-off. So we'll look at the guidelines to see if that's,
That would be one for us.
Yeah.
Tier two.
yeah.
The single unit.
It is a, it's got
One
one machine.
zero.
to,
101.
But I have to, we have to, so one for each.
So that's
Each and-
Let's see here. Sure.
Does the new equipment have two engines too?
Yeah.
Sure.
So be a one, so be one for one, two for two.
Two for two, yeah. I'm getting it.
2 for 2, all right.
We got two scrapers, right? Already.
So you certainly can apply for both of them and separately,
So,
yeah. Unless you wanted to apply for as a 4 for 1.
Once more.
Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Well, we're done. So, yeah, fortunately, we're at the end of the presentation. That was probably an avoidable accident, but so we're at the end of the presentation. The presentation slides will be available on our website along with the video. So definitely check back. We will be posting the ranking spreadsheet probably in the fall as we process the applications. So we've had an exponential increase in applications over the last few years. We used to have about 15 applications, then we had 30, then we had another 75 on top of the following year, and in 2021 we had about 130 applications. So I mean, we like applications because we have to get this money spent, so we need to get it through the process. And we've got 4 years to do it, so with each cycle. So we are inclined to get the projects moving. And otherwise we have to give it back to the state. So
this project worth?
what's that?
Grant amount, what the average grant amount was?
I don't have an average. I think the ones I've seen have been ranging between 30,000 and 100,000. We're not even quite to the bottom of the list, which would be about 150,000 near the bottom of the list. But yeah, they've been fairly parsed out, smaller grants. So we used to get these huge grants at $300,000 and they'd use up all the funds, and then it would go to Granite Rock or another large company. And it's like, well, nobody else gets grants. So I think by doing this, we've actually expanded a lot of opportunity for the community. So I've got a question here. Let's see, I'm going to start. I've got lots of questions. Okay, so question is, so my understanding is no hour meter, it will not qualify. I have 2 tractors and one with a working hour meter. I was hoping for a 2-for-1. You can still apply for the 1-for-1. It may not rank as well, but I would encourage you to apply because the funding amounts we have expanded tremendously, and I think there's plenty of opportunity. We don't know how many applications we'll receive, so it's always good to apply. The 2-for-1, and I guess the good news is that you don't have to destroy 2 tractors for the project. You could still get the grant for a 1-for-1. It would rank a little bit lower, so you might not see the grant as soon, or it might be lower on the list where we don't have funding, but it's still worth applying for it. Any other questions?
Does the equipment have to be similar? Can you trade a forklift for a tractor?
Has to be similar. Has to be the same use.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important. And this is something we run into with 2-for-1 is that it does have to be the same use, but the 2 tractors are going to have a lot more hours on it than 1 tractor. So you got to meet a lot more hours. So it might extend the project life out for a few more years. But we're required by the the guidelines to offer up to a 10-year project life, which essentially will bring most projects to the maximum grant amount. So 50% of the grant or the project up to 150,000.
Going back to that question, if the hour meter is not available, fuel receipts are accepted on a case-by-case basis.
That's right. Yep. So you could call staff here and just ask if you can just let them know what you're doing and what your records are. So make sure you have really complete records. Yeah.
So in the case of an ag pump, what if you were renting them for the last 2 years?
I'm sorry.
If you were renting one,
Oh, renting. No, it has to be owned. Has to be an owned. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
I have a question. So on the 2-for-1, what is the primary and then the secondary tractor, which is just not equivalent?
Same use.
Same use.
Same use.
Wasn't the same use.
Yeah, it can be.
Primary 1-for-1, but they have another tractor and they wanted to add it to go further on the list.
Yeah.
But that secondary tractor was not the same use.
Same. It's fairly loose. It was used in, ag operation
Correct.
and same kind of, if you're replacing, I mean, it's just a base tractor, right? Or it would be, I'm not quite sure what you mean, a different use. Special.
Like a chopper. And a tractor.
We'll have to take a look at the guidelines on that, but I think that sounds like we could do that.
Okay.
But let's take a look. It's worth applying. We can, or just checking for eligibility before you apply. Yeah. Irene.
I'm just checking to make sure I think I missed it. Talk about the replacement of equipment in the horsepower.
Oh, yes. You can replace a piece of equipment for up to 125% of the horsepower rating. You can go over, actually. You can go over 125 horsepower of the baseline equipment. However, the grant amount is based on a tractor or piece of equipment that's within that 125%. And the emissions are based on the higher horsepower engine. So it's a little tricky, but we do those. We do accept the higher horsepower equipment. You're not going to rank as well because the higher horsepower tends to be higher emissions. But we do allow that, so it's definitely worth applying for. Any other questions?
So for that situation, you still need a vehicle within the 125 horsepower, correct?
Yes,
You have to put
2 quotes. Yep.
What's on 125 horsepower?
125%.
The quote that we base the grant amount on is less than 125% of the baseline horsepower. The emissions are based on the higher horsepower engine. Yeah. All right, what about, let's see. Will applications that request funding only to deploy charging infrastructure be eligible? We are only doing the equipment itself, not the infrastructure for an electrification project. What about horsepower? Can the user purchase a higher horsepower? Okay, I think we answered that. Hollister is not part of the low income area, I believe. Let's see. You can check on our webpage the locations. You can type in your address on our webpage on the interactive map that will indicate where you are in relation to a low income area or disadvantaged community. So definitely go to our webpage and you can verify your location. Do you provide funding for 100% of a new tractor? Or what percent of tractor do you provide funding for? It's 50% of the new tractor up to $150,000. All right. Eli. Sure.
And you said today that if you were a cheaper one, they would rent that.
Each of those 1-for-1s would rank lower. Yes, and so we would have 4 applications if that was the case to evaluate. And the benefit of doing it, there's really no benefit in if you're going to apply for 2-for-1, you don't have the option to go for a 1-for-1 later. 2-for-1 is so you choose one or the other. If you're going to do a 2-for-1, go for that. If you just want to separate them and just do 2 separate projects and see where you end up on the ranking, then you can do that. But to do all of them, but to do 2-for-1 is definitely going to rank higher, so you'll have better opportunity. So we would fund that project, one of those projects first. That's what we've been doing anyway with those older projects, is we funded the 2-for-1 before we even get down to where the 1-for-1 projects would have been ranked.
If you do a 2-for-1, could you still get 2 contracts? Or is that just
It's one contract. Yep.
So that would be one, so you can do 2-for-1 of another.
Yes, you can do that. Eli?
I have an operation and I have 2 tractors, and I handed in an application for just a 1-for-1. Can I change along the way to a 2-for-1?
We haven't run across that, but I think you need to make a decision when you apply. Because that wouldn't be fair to the other applicants if we changed the ranking and knocked somebody out of the running because somebody went from a 1-for-1 to a 2-for-1 after our projects were evaluated and ranked. Ty?
I just wanted to add a clarification on the hour meter. If they do fail, they just do
Yeah.
third project.
Yes, that's true. If you have a hour meter that's failed, document it. when it failed, what the hour meter reading was when it failed, and then replace it, and you start at zero. And so we can do the estimates on that, but it's, it could run for years without it being replaced, so that's the risk. But yeah, if you want to participate in the future, or if you know the date that you're around when your hour meter failed, and you can base that on records, then we can use that and make adjustments accordingly. 2 new messages. Okay. Does total fleet emissions affect application ranking? No, it affects eligibility of the project. So we can't fund a project into compliance. So if you need to replace a piece of equipment to meet the fleet emissions limits by a certain date, we couldn't fund that project into compliance unless there's 3 years of surplus emissions. If it's 3 years before the date, then we could fund it. As far as ranking goes, it's equipment specific. So we have to use the hours based on that piece of equipment. All right, I guess that wraps it up. Thanks for coming out, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to call our staff, help you with the eligibility. If you don't want to go through the applications first, but definitely take advantage of that. So thanks for coming. Thanks for coming, everybody online.